Lona, listen to me. Things in nowhere are worse than they seem. I know you need money to escape it, but—
Shut up, Toasty! You're not my dad! I can take care of myself!
Oh, God.
What does he know? I'm a mercenary! Oh, shit.
As Lona is force-fed multiple sausages, enslaved, and then sold to an army barracks where she is beaten for falling asleep due to exhaustion from overeating those sausages, she realizes something. Lona RPG is the most disturbing RPG ever created. Lona RPG is an unapologetic game. Only Taiwanese independence activists can even play it, which might actually be an undercover Chinese espionage attack, as you'll soon find out that this game is excellent at destroying morale. Also, none of these people can play the game either, so depending on your perspective, China's kinda getting a lot of wins out of this one. Anyways, once you've spent $30 and all your social credit, we load into the game. First up is a tutorial where some guy yaps about cryptic bullshit that is completely irrelevant to everything. Then we're thrown into the sewers. We're on a quest to collect 8 rat tails, but really it's just a humiliation ritual in order to learn how the combat works. Combat in Lona RPG is crazy unique and crazy impressive, seeing as it was made in RPG Maker, which usually has combat more like this. It's action combat entirely on the keyboard, using keys that you assign yourself to different skills. For now, the craziest thing we can do is use our lantern to burn them, but this will get absolutely nuts. It will also continue to be pretty janky in terms of hitboxes and controls, but it's a jank you'll eventually learn, and once you do, dying never feels too unfair. Anyways, the most important part of combat, and the reason I'm currently trying to sleep while getting gnawed on, is stamina. Stamina in this game depletes faster than this character would if he had a child, but we'll get to him and more racism later. This is your food meter, and this is your stamina meter. Resting consumes your food meter to fill up the stamina meter. You'll do this a lot. Eating food items fills up your food meter, which means you constantly need to eat food and is without a doubt your biggest expense over the course of the game. But finances can wait. We've just accidentally stumbled upon some goblins, or in this game, orcans. If you've ever seen Goblin Slayer, yeah, it's basically that guy, and he's in this game too, by the way, but we'll get to that later. This area is introducing the stealth system, which is by far the most fun part of this game for me. I love stealth games, and Lona RPG does it great, especially for an RPG Maker game. Basically, you press Control to enter stealth mode. If you're behind something, it's harder for enemies to see you, and you can throw infinite rocks with a bit of stamina to distract them. All interactions, minus the rock throwing, take you out of stealth mode, unless you have this trait, but for the last time, we'll get to that later. And that's it, that's the stealth system. It's really simple, but the reason it's so fun is because of what's at stake. If you get caught, the most heinous images ever constructed by mankind will assault your eyes for at least the next minute. And as we know from the intro, it's not game over. This is your life now. Over the course of the game, Lona also develops into a really sweet character, so that just adds to the pure disgust you'll experience. I threw up, I'm not ashamed to admit it, but that's not happening just yet. So for now, let's swallow our vomit, grab the sword, and go report the previous adventurer's demise. The world map in this game is absurdly perilous to navigate. Every single step takes stamina and has a chance to start a random encounter. Roads take less stamina, so you'll want to stick to them. Every step you take, time passes, so getting anywhere on the map is a multi-day experience that takes a lot of food and a lot of suffering. You can fast travel, but it's so expensive that it isn't worth it, and I kind of like this. I mean, it's realistic because there's such a high demand for transportation from all the displaced people. It makes sense that, following capitalism, it'd be a lot more expensive. But it also means that I gotta walk around the world map more, and we all know how that goes. For example, when you take one step onto the beach, trigger a sneaker wave encounter, don't have enough stamina to fight it because you were trying to make it to the tavern where you could rest, and are washed away to a deserted island with like 9 bisexual men. Once you experience that, you'll understand my pain. As a final note, you can enter any tile on the map, which is a great way to make the somewhat forced exploration less repetitive and boring. I mean, mean, some of the areas are super boring, but some aren't, and they have resources, or these highlighted areas that are littered across the map have unique encounters, and some of them are the most fun I had in the game. Ultimately, exploring the world is a must, and you really do feel like an adventurer. So in true adventurer fashion, the first thing we're going to explore is the tavern. Taverns are home to the Adventurers Guild, which is why we're here. We're checking in with our guild receptionist, who is much more concerned that we got him those 8 rat tails than the fact that our coworker is dead. Apparently though, getting rat tails was an easy quest, and they don't do those anymore now that there are so many monsters nearby. So considering my combat skills, Lona will be suffering in my hands from here on out. That ends our forced introduction to the world of LonaRPG. We have a couple questions to get us started, a few directions to go, but from here on out, everything you do is optional. You could choose to keep doing quests, or you can work at the tavern, become a lady of the night, or, I don't know, resign yourself to a life of slavery. Before we dive into an exploration of some of these choices, though, I want to first show you guys the menu because it's a technical RPG Maker marvel, and then I want to orient you a little bit better to the world around you. Why are there so many refugees, and why are there more monsters than usual? Is the lore of this RPG Maker H game really that deep? First, look at this menu. I mean, it is glorious. Compare it to the default RPG Maker menu, or what you see in most RPG Maker games. This is just glorious. It's beautiful, it's efficient. The first screen of the menu is the main stats, which gives you a general overview of what's going on with Lona's body, and some of these look absolutely insane right now, and that's because I haven't explained the stats yet. Yeah, this game has stats, and I mean, really, after all you've seen, why would you expect anything less? I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but basically on this page, you can see if you have any diseases of a particular transmission type, or you can check how much Oreo cream filling is filling each of your orifices, which becomes important when I tell you about the pregnancy mechanic. I'll get more into the pregnancy mechanics in a sec. I can't believe I just said that sentence. But basically, if you don't want to have little Oreo babies, then you want to remove all of the cream filling, because babies can't exist without cream filling. I told you at the start that this game was crazy. Moving on from that, you have your item and your equip screens, and by the way, anything that you equip appears on your character, so I don't know if Lona bought a ToastyTime shirt or something, it'd probably appear on her. The last important thing here is the experience bar, which goes up for a myriad of different reasons, like subscribing to ToastyTime, and every time the bar fills up, you get a skill point, which you can then invest into different traits or into different also traits, but that give you different attributes. Some of the traits that give you attributes actually change Lona's personality, which is really cool, but then some of the later traits are locked behind personality requirements that the game doesn't tell you about. Like if you are a timid Lona, you can't then also be a cannibal Lona, which I was really sad about. Also, one last thing, you can also change the difficulty settings in the menu, but word of advice, don't do that. With that out of the way, let's look at the world around us. This is Nowhere Island. Recently, some sort of black mist has rolled in and caused the town of Cyberus to fall into a fleshy ruin. Don't go back there. Just like the difficulty settings, just some things are best left untouched. Just about everyone has fled to Nowhere City. There are way too many people here, meaning social welfare programs are now out the window and the homeless are being robbed and enslaved, sometimes voluntarily because they need food. Speaking of food, most of it is coming from these fish people who sell fish. There's also one ship off the island, but it has an absurdly high fare of 20 gold coins, or more if you take too long. That's capitalism at its finest, baby. Supply and demand, plus you got a captive market. Here we find the ultimate goal of the game. Lona wants to leave the island, but she's broke. Your job is to get her money up, not her tummy up. Although there's a lot of ways to make money, the best way, and the way that gets you the most interesting moral quandaries, is by completing quests. So, like in the Black Souls video, we're gonna try to be the hero of the corn game, stay away from sin, and complete a few different quest lines. Before we head out though, we should hire some help. Lona is just a girl after all, and not an efficient serial killer. Yet. This is where we can find Goblin Slayer and Megumin, and I think Skyrim guy is in this. Also, there's a Leroy Jenkins statue, and there's this painting, and there's Pepe in the ending.
I'm all for a game having secrets, but when a Leroy Jenkins statue becomes a part of your game's lore, it becomes a little more difficult to take some of the darker themes seriously. Also, look, I touch grass, by the way.
Pause on the tangent, I'll come back to the game's questionable writing. For now, let's go piss on a log in front of this very excited, demented little boy. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a two-part questline where we learn about the intricate reproductive capabilities of two of the creatures in this game, and is where I will introduce the pregnancy mechanics. You can have 7 different kinds of babies in this game, based on which creature gets you pregnant. Elise, this little demented boy, is enamored by this and will give you free abortions if he can take your fetus. Yeah, there's abortion mechanics too. Of these 7 babies, you can also rebirth as 4 of them in a sort of new game plus mechanic where you take on their appearance.
So the game is kind of like Pokemon, except with your own children and traumatic. I didn't engage much with this mechanic during my playthrough because personally, these simulation scenes left me feeling pretty physically ill, but I know there's a lot of depth here from seeing videos and reading the wiki. Really, I'm doing an honorable deed by trying to show you, my dear innocent viewers, that a no-sins run is possible, and that you can escape with minimal PTSD. Not that I did, but maybe you'll have better luck. These questlines where you're learning about the biology of the orcans and the fish kinds are surprisingly well thought out and logically sound within the internal logic of the game world, and they're really compelling actually, with deep moral questions being asked. Over the course of these 2 questlines, all of the experiences that you've had in the game up to this point kind of get reframed, because you learn that these monsters aren't doing these evil things just because they were born evil or they're naturally evil, but they're doing these things because they are, to them, seen as normal and biologically needed and the only way to continue their species. And I mean, every species wants to continue living, right? How would humans act if the only way to have children was by illicit procurement of a womb? There's no black and white morality. There's a lot of room for personal interpretation, which is exactly what I'd like to see happening in the comments down below. Also, during the Fishkind quest, you can revive a god by bringing her the horniest man alive, who she then feeds upon. Just thought I'd mention that.
Although I loved the stealth mechanics, this next quest is a great example of how buggy, or maybe just poorly thought out, the game is sometimes. You need to steal a musket for this guy, which you ultimately get as payment, so definitely do this quest because the musket is awesome. There's 2 main approaches to get into the barracks where it's kept. Either you can convince them you're there to inspect the equipment, or you can sneak in. You can only convince them if you have enough strength, or maybe I convinced them because I look like a weak little boy. I'm not sure which one it was. Anyways, I was too weak to convince him the first time around, so I tried to sneak in. But if you do this, you will almost get soft-locked. This guard is staring in a straight line at the door you have to go into. There's no other way for you to move, and if you walk in front of him, even in stealth, he will see you. I had put a good amount of points into stealth at this point. I had the trait to throw rocks further. It didn't matter. What you actually have to do is trick them, stealth past this front guy, throw a rock in this tiny little space, and then run past. I don't know about you, but this felt weird to play and like it wasn't intended, even though it's the only solution. Another great moral dilemma comes from later in this same questline when you're helping the noble Cicely and her guardian Grey Rat. She's one of the nobles trying to protect the dirty commoners, and as her story progresses, she eventually enlists your help in raiding a slave caravan. You could choose to side with the slavers, but since we're trying to be the hero of this downtrodden world, we help her out. Only for this to happen. You are free.
Free?
That's right, we just set you free.
So hungry. Do you have something for us to eat?
What? We chose to be slaves so we can eat a meal every day. We chose to work for food.
I have kept my children safe with my slave contract. What should we do now?
There are monsters everywhere now. Can you ensure our safety? Can you get us off the island?
They gave me a lot of food. I would have had a chance to get full. What should we do now?
Don't you have any self-respect? The people of the Kingdom of England should not be slaves. Well, another noble girl comes to play White Knight. What are you gonna do now?
I'm going back to the slave trader to report you. Maybe he'll give me an extra meal. You are so screwed.
You, listen to me, come back!
I love this scene, and honestly, it's my favorite in the game, because it raises such an interesting moral question. If put in the right circumstances, would you sell your freedom for food. It's something I don't ever think about in my daily life. It shows me a new idea. It pushes my comfort zone. This game is really good at that. And that's exactly what video games as art should be doing. Before I get to the craziest moral dilemma in this game, and the last one we're going to cover, I want to pause for a sec and deliver on 2 earlier promises. First, I can't decide how racist this game is. It's definitely racist. I mean, this character literally says oy vey while scamming another character who's also meant to be a grotesque depiction of a trans Redditor. Now, talking about this is a little bit difficult because I did literally just say that video games as art should be pushing my comfort zone and showing me new ideas, and that is exactly what's happening in this scene. But damn, the game really tests your limit for stomaching this kind of thing, because there's also this character who talks in a way where you just feel racist for reading it, but he's also really badass, so yeah, even in Lona RPG, this feels out of place, because Lona RPG has its own internal game lore racism that it can talk about and use to tackle, real world problems in a really visceral and emotional way. Like this earlier quest line where you're getting the aforementioned Leroy Jenkins statue. After you return it to this guy, then this guy who was before racist to you is now racist to the fish people, and that's an interesting commentary on how racism is just kind of made up. Stuff like that is really interesting and thought-provoking, and it manages to be those things while still keeping me within the game's world. But then these scenes, where you're basically just taking real-world racism and putting it into the game without providing any substantial commentary, it really takes me out of the game world of Lona RPG, and it's also certainly not winning any players over to the Taiwanese independence activism movement. See, this game really walks a fine line between incredible world building, lore, and immersion, and then it has these moments where there's like the real world racism, or these weird artwork meme images, or this strangely played for laugh, various homosexual scenes that happen throughout the game. There's a fine line between really interesting and intelligent writing and then just horribly offensive and out of place content. I'm assuming the dev was trying to create moments of levity with these scenes, and I don't know, maybe things are different in Taiwan, but these scenes come across horribly to an American audience. That's the only audience I can speak to as a glorious American myself. And then these meme images just totally take me out of the game world, and I was literally baffled when I found them. I was like, what are these doing here? I truly believe that this game has some incredible writing, and it tackles some really interesting moral issues, and in a setting that allows the developer to go really deep into those issues and really shock the player and make them think hard about, what they would do. But then these scenes come in and they feel really reductive to the overall message and tone of the game. I'm really curious, for real, to know what you guys think about all this, so while you're scrolling down to leave a comment, if you could hit subscribe, that would be awesome.
The craziest moral dilemma in this game is woven right into the gameplay. Fairly early into your playthrough, you'll experience the horrors of an Orkin lair, in which there are many prisoners. You can save these prisoners by leading them to the exit, but there's a couple hurdles. One is that they can't enter stealth, and if an Orkin sees them, well, they're used for the purpose in which they were captured, right in front of you, as you're trying to save them. Two is that in order for them to actually escape, they have to be within 1 or 2 tiles of the map exit. Combine these things and sprinkle in the game's extremely unreliable AI, and you have the moment that broke my will to legitimately finish this game. Yeah, I didn't actually beat the game. I cheated in the last 10 gold coins. Why, you ask? Because of these kindly, well-meaning dumbass women. I know, they've just been through the worst trauma of their lives, but can they crawl in a straight line? I spent 20 minutes trying to guide their dumbass AI selves out of the room, and in the end, it didn't even count. These stupid, good-for-nothing, worthless sacks of— And that's what Lona RPG does to a man.
You start with lofty aspirations to save everyone, even though you're told not to, but after not even 10 minutes of gameplay, most players are going to realize that it's just not worth it.
After all, you're just a little girl.
Who's definitely over 21.
Lona RPG forces us to confront the most evil and depraved parts of humanity. And since it's a video game, you have to physically interact with all of this. There's no layer of separation between you and the game. You're right up there, Because you have to be, or else you're gonna be traumatized.
Lona RPG just wouldn't be as impactful if it wasn't a video game, because it's having to interact with these things, to do these things yourself, to be a part of these horrible experiences and press the enter key the whole way through. It's having to interact with these things that makes those experiences stick and really impact you.
I like to think that the way Lona RPG forces players to confront violence is doing so in a way where the majority of players, hopefully all of them, are gonna come away from the experience completely averse to violence in the real world, because what they see in the game is just so emotionally scarring and really fucking disturbing. But it's also possible that I'm completely off base here and that this is just wishful thinking and that gamers are just too much of a different breed to be impacted in this way. So if that's the case, if I'm completely off base here with my analysis, it's happened before, if that's the case, then I think you should use Lona RPG as an indicator of which psychos you should avoid in the Discord chat rooms. Thanks for watching.